All right, well, welcome everybody to another edition of our Pro Lego Live Chats. I am Kevin here with Justin. I apologize for the late start. My Mac decided not to cooperate with me about 5 minutes for the beginning, and nothing worked. I had to restart multiple times. And also, sorry for some of the noise distraction. The people cutting our lawn decided to now is the perfect time to start. So we've got a little bit of noise in the background, which try to control, but we will get through it. So Justin and I today are going to talk a little bit about lessons learned on GroundCrew. This was a large language model application that we started right after the new year. We had some spare cycles, and we wanted to try to create a new LLM based application from the ground up, sort of step by step. And I've done a series of videos on that. And Justin and I thought this would be a nice chance to pull up, talk about the last month, what we learned, what we didn't learn, and kind of lessons learned for everybody else. And so without a lot of scheduled questions, I think Justin and I are just going to wing it like we would in a normal day-to-day work conversation. All right. So, Justin, it's pretty amazing. So, quickly summarize the intention of GroundCrew, what it is, how we got started for somebody here who maybe isn't familiar with our previous discussions.
Sure. And can you hear me okay?
You know what? You got a lot of noise. I'm going to summarize for everybody. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. So it sounds like they're right outside Justin's office window at the moment, cutting the lawn. So GroundCrew is an attempt to build an LLM RAG application on top of our code. In this case, the code base is the NeoSophia repository we use for making our example YouTube videos and experiments that we've been doing over the past year on developing LLM applications. The basic idea is we want an interface where a new developer, a current developer like me, someone who forgets where code is, can go in and ask general natural language questions about the code and get answers in context. So the analogy we called it GroundCrew because of GitHub Copilot helps you write your code. GroundCrew is kind of like the people at the airport, organizing your luggage and bags and making sure everything's kind of working. So it's a way for you to understand what your code is doing and have more of a and kind of interrogate it and figure out how different functions work, where they are, and what they are for. So I think that is, I guess, a summary where we are. The project lasted a month, and there was a number of lessons learned, which I'll discuss with Justin in a section. But I wanted to kind of talk about the steps, what to expect from a project like this, because we find that a lot of teams begin with kind of a demo application. They kind of get something up and running, but it's not quite right. Then trying to figure out where do I go next. And so we're going to touch on some of the techniques that Justin and the team used in this project. Justin, was that enough time to let the guy to finish cutting your lawn?
I think they moved on for the most part. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds better. Okay. All right. So it was about a month of work, right, with the team to do GroundCrew?
Yeah, it was about a month of work from the first conversation about, okay, what do we want to do, to some initial planning to building and testing everything out. Yeah, it was about a month.
Okay. And give me a rough sense of the schedule, like, kind of what are the major steps, like week by week type of thing, if you can just kind of high level how things worked.
Yeah, so we started off with brainstorming the initial idea. Perfect timing, I know. The initial idea, and what do we want to achieve in the first 4 weeks? Once we had that, and this is not the first time we've worked on a project like this, and so we kind of knew the components that we need to build. And so after we said, okay, we want an analysis tool for code, we spent some time thinking about, okay, how can we do that? How can we break it up into components? And we pretty quickly realized that we needed an agent approach, because how you analyze code, how do you ask questions about code? There's a lot of different ways you can approach that. Are you looking at something like static analysis? Do you just want to be able to ask general questions with natural language? So we knew that we would need sort of an agent to act as a dispatcher for different tools. Mm-hmm. So that's what we decided pretty early on. And I'd say weeks kind of run together, but the first week or two was really about building out that core foundation, getting an agent that can answer questions, getting an agent that can call different tools to do different things, look at different aspects of the code, whether that's linting or asking natural language questions, analyzing complexity, whatever it might be. And so that was really the first 2 weeks. And then after that, it was just about building out. We add tools to do the things that we would like to do with the code. And I think a good example of that is, well, the first time you used it, you asked a question that was very different than anything that we've been considering. But at that point, it was maybe week 3, we're already in a position to say, okay, now we want to do something differently, answer a different type of question. So we quickly build out a tool, have the agent use that tool, and start iterating and kind of refining from about week 3 to the final week.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out who deserves more credit right now. You for being able to talk through a noisy background, or the audience for sticking around with us and suffering through the noise. So I'll summarize, like, it sounds like the beginning part was we kind of an idea of the task we wanted to do. We knew it was going to take ages, so kind of building up the agent orchestration framework and then building tools. One thing I've noticed is that on pretty much every project that you've worked on that's not sort of something trivial or a demo, you end up building tools. And I don't hear a lot of other teams talking about this. Can you like show an example from the code of what a tool is and why it, when you call it, why, what it means? Because I hear people vaguely refer to like Python functions, and I think OpenAI has mentioned this and a couple other things, but I don't think it gets enough attention because I don't think a lot of developers are even aware that this is a pattern they can use.
Sure. The valuable thing about tools is that it takes something that's very specific, a certain task you want. I'll show you examples in a second, but for this example, for this project, rather, GroundCrew, we wanted to do code analysis. We could have an agent just talk about code. We could give it examples of code, but it would all be high level and pretty generic. Where tools are useful is if you want something very specific that doesn't necessarily need the what the LLM can do well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll try to share a screen and show you an example. Let me pull this up.
Yeah, some of this stuff, it sounds so, we say tools, frameworks, it sounds like almost mysterious and abstract. And then when you actually go look at an example, it's just, okay.
So our streaming platform is not letting me share again. So let's talk through it. Because I don't think, maybe we don't need to look at the code. But I think a really good example of a tool is linting. So something that we would want to ask GroundCrew about is, where in this code base is the formatting kind of poor, or do I have unused imports or things that would be caught by a linter? Now we could just file by file dump that into the context and ask the LLM to try to answer our question about formatting or kind of code style, but that's really not what the LLM excels at. The LLM excels at understanding what we're asking and then reasoning about that question. Whereas linting, there are 100 linters out there for Python, and they're really good at linting, at detecting these style formatting issues, things like unused imports or whatever it might be. And so rather than have the LLM try to reason over, code style, let's just use this tool that's really good at linting and have the agent know that, oh, if you're asking about formatting questions, well, that's a question that a linter can answer. And so then the agent calls this lint file tool, and then under the hood, this calls, just one of the standard linters for Python, gets the output of that linter, which might say, well, you have too many blank lines here, not enough blank lines here, you need white space here, and you have unused imports and a couple of unused variables. So then that output from the linting tool goes back to the LLM, and now the LLM, the agent, can say, okay, you asked about formatting questions, here's the output from a linter. It can summarize, you have a couple of unused imports and variables, a few formatting issues, and then approach the solution that way.
Okay, so in this case, the linting tool is it's a literal like library inside is it in the repository here? Or is it's in the repo, or is it installed on your local environment?
Yeah, it's installed locally, and it's something that we can call, basically spin off a process from GroundCrew to run the linter.
Okay, so you have the so the tools.py thing is just the interface that you use to call the linting tool on your file system. And then I know this is like kind of like a stupid question, but I just because I try to actually imagine in my mind how this stuff works, and I think when it gets into prompts and prompt instructions, like it's easy for me to miss what happens in the file because it's not some big complex library. It's like 3 lines of code. Where do you kind of tell the LLM system like how to figure out when to call this class?
So it's an agent.py, and this is a pretty, I won't say complex, but it's medium complexity. We spent a lot of time, probably the better part of a week, getting this just right.
Okay.
Now, I'll caveat this. If you are just starting out and you want to have an agent that can call tools, OpenAI, their newer models have a really nice interface through the API where it can call tools and format tool messages and things like that. We ran that as a side experiment and it worked great, but we wanted something more general so that we could plug in open source models if we wanted to.
That makes sense.
So what you're looking at here is we have an agent class, and this is where whenever you or I type a question, it goes to this agent class, and we send the question to the LLM, to the agent, and say, okay, here's the question. If you can answer it just kind of off the cuff, great, answer it. But you probably want to call a tool to help you answer this question. So we give it the list of tools, whether it's linting, writing doc strings, computing complexity. We have maybe half a dozen now. And so in these methods, we look at the response from the LLM after we give it the question and the list of tools, and it'll say, yeah, I want to run the linter tool. And so run the linter tool, and it chooses its the parameters it needs to go into the linting tool, like a file name. And then it comes to this method where it runs whatever tool we've specified and generates the output from that tool. In this case, it would be the output from the linter. And then that goes to the LLM to summarize a response.
Okay, so then when someone types in a task, you use the LLM to reason through what the person's working and use that to kind of to say, okay, this person's kind of asking to do this, therefore this is the right tool. And then you call this agent or the agent then tells it which tool to go look for and what to run.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. So then a lot of our time was spent building out this agent class, which I suspect a lot of teams are going to want to use open source models for this kind of application, so they have control over it and they can run it locally instead of using an API. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but a lot of companies are very concerned about using this kind of like using third-party APIs into their code for obvious reasons. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's a design choice that other teams want to make. All right, so then is that the you think about like doing this project, is that the lion's share of the work? Is like, okay, I got to get a task. How do I make sure, what tool do I need? How do I tell the agent to find what tool to use, and then you call the tool, write the tool, and have it go? Is that sort of the primary work in building the application?
Yeah, certainly for this application, because we wanted this generic solution, that was quite a bit of the work. I think from a high level, there were 3 areas where we spent time, and one of those areas was this design of the foundational agent that can select tools, call tools, parsing the response, sort of the communication handling around the agent and the tool calling. That was, I'd say, at least a week out of the 4 weeks.
Okay.
The other 2 components were, I probably forgot to say this before, but the very first thing we did was just lay out data structure. So if we're working with code, how do we want to read in the code and parse the code and store the code in data structures so that we can work with it easily in memory? So that was probably the first week. Then the agent design. And then once we had that foundation laid, then it was really on to tools. And so kind of the 3 areas were creating the data structures, parsing, all that kind of foundational stuff, the agent tool design, and then finally building out those tools. So once we had an agent that can call a tool, well, we want to add to the tools. Because when you're adding the tools, what you're really doing is adding capabilities to the agent. You're expanding its repertoire of what it can do. So we started with a generic sort of question answering tool, and then we added the linting tool, we added a docstring writer, we added a complexity analysis tool. And so as we build out this repertoire, we're building out the features, maybe one way to say it, of what the agent can talk about and what it can reason about given the code.
Okay, and then we did a demo in our previous live. If you want to go see a demo, Ben took through a bunch of examples, so I wouldn't need to do that again. But if I understand it, to actually build the data structure and the embeddings, you had the LLMs look at the code and summarize what the code does, and that's what we put in the embeddings. Correct? You didn't. The code itself did not go directly into the embeddings. Is that?
Yeah, so what we did is we took the code and we generated summaries of the code, natural language summaries, and then we generated embeddings of the summaries. So if we wanted to search over the code using natural language, we would look at the embeddings. We would compare the question against the embeddings that were generated from summaries of the code. So for that one lint file tool that you just showed, the process would be, here's the source code. Then we have an LLM generate a summary, natural language summary. So it'd be something like, this is a tool that will run a linter against a piece of code and provide a response to an LLM. So then that's the natural language summary of what that code does. And we can embed that so it's searchable.
All right, let me just ask a specific question about it. So is that the code.py here? This is the thing that goes through and summarizes what's in the code?
I believe so. If you scroll up a little bit.
Or chunks, or this chunks the...
Yeah, this is formatting. This might be a more foundational module. So.
Code utilities, get imports. Yeah, I was just looking for a prompt that says, read this code and summarize it. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay, that's actually under scripts.
Scripts, okay. Let's just have somebody else drive here.
The function that does that is in scripts run, but then that if you want to look at the prompt, we kept all of our prompts in a system prompts.py. And that's just for organization. We kept anything kind of at the level of task assignment, prompt.
There it is. Okay, yeah. This is what I was looking for, because this is what I'm usually looking for in our applications to kind of figure out what's happening. Is where do you organize the prompts? Okay, so you actually put all the system's prompts in a single file instead of having them within each function like I've seen in the past.
Yeah, and the benefit of this is these prompts, they determine how you interact with the LLM, how performant it is, how accurate it is, and you can keep these things in the functions that use them, but then what you end up with is prompts all over the code base, and you say, okay, I know I'm asking the LLM to do something, but I can't find the prompt, and where was it again? Yeah. And so by keeping everything in this one module, this one file, we have a consolidated set of all of our modes of interacting with the LLM.
I can also imagine this kind of structure would be super useful if you want to switch. This is probably why you also came up with it. If you're anticipating switching to a different LLM, like this is going to break all your system prompts. I mean, for those of you who haven't tried any of this stuff, you can't just switch LLMs and have all the prompts work. I mean, your whole architecture will fall apart. But I would imagine if you want to go with, Mixtral or one of the other open source models, you would start with looking at this file and seeing if you can hit a similar response. So you could have a different systems prompts file tied to, I guess, a model would be one way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, you said it really well. We could have this for, let's say OpenAI prompts, and then if we're using Mixtral, we have a parallel, kind of a fork of this file that has different prompts. 100%. Yeah,
it's just amazing how early we are at this stuff, and I just can imagine a number of teams out there who are gonna, start with GPT-4 and go, you know what, policy costs, whatever, we want to introduce another LLM, and I go, oh crap, I gotta go and refactor everything. Although I guess it's not that hard. I mean, you just have to pull everything into a single file, but this is certainly an easier way to get started. Yeah. This is Great. So Justin, I think this is a pretty good overview of kind of how it works. So really, once you had like the basic framework, like I said, then it's a matter of getting it to use the tools correctly once you have the code. But I would imagine you could also invest more time in the upfront, like data and code summary. I mean, I'm sure I'm just imagining things where if you find you want to answer a particular type of question, instead of just summarizing the code, like summarizing multiple files and functions and how they interact. To me, it feels like in addition to building tools, you could also invest more in the larger system knowledge that you can batch process through a single LLM call to say, here's how everything's working together. Any thoughts on that? Am I off in left field?
Let's see. So what do you mean? So the first thing we did was kind of, as you said, we created a method, to go through, parse out all the code, and then generate summaries of the code so we can embed those and search against them.
I'm saying, could you imagine investing more engineering time in that summarization or summarization process where maybe you're summarizing through a different dimension, like at a system level or a workflow level, or instead of just, because I think you guys just went through sort of function by function and summarized, but didn't try to summarize how things are connecting and talking to each other.
That's a really interesting question. I think it's a challenging question, especially for where we are with LLMs right now, because this is something we started to think about later on as a couple of weeks went by. Whether you're talking about GitHub Copilot or really any RAG methodology, you say here's a couple of snippets or a couple of documents that you give to the LLM in context and have the LLM answer a question about it. But when it comes to systems level sort of analysis or question answering, that's much more challenging because you can't just take the whole code base, especially if it's large, and put it in context. It won't fit. And so that's I'd say it's a more challenging aspect of how do you get an LLM to reason over an entire code base, its interdependencies, interconnections.
Okay, I got another idea, so I'm just going to keep throwing it right. Huh? I got another way you could do it. I'm just going to keep throwing out crazy ideas, and you can just tell me why they're crazy. What if you just like captured your log files and you had more like if you like logged every time like a function or a class was called in your log, or had like some system out that you can then you could actually read that in. The LM might be reason across that and understand what's happening in a workflow.
Yeah, you could do something like that. And this also blends into, so there's an interface, right? I think an interface, this is kind of similar to linting. And what do you want a tool to do versus what do you want an LLM to do? So yeah, that's a good example. Right. If you have, systematic logs that are being printed, you could give those logs to the LLM and say, summarize what's going on in this session of running the code. There's also tools like, I'm blanking on the name right now, sort of runtime analysis. It tracks your code as a profiler.
Right.
So you can profile your code in different ways. So one approach to that system, giving the LLM a systems level understanding of what's going on in your code, might be to have an interface with one of these other specific tools like a profiler. So you could do whether it's function, call graphs, or memory profiling. There's kind of a suite of analysis tools that you could then hook up via the tool mechanism to an LLM to give it that system level understanding.
Right. Okay. I wasn't even thinking about that. And I'm guessing it would probably be easier to leverage the tools because they're designed to do that instead of having to read. I mean, instead of like trying to capture what the tool would produce.
Yeah. And this is one of those things, I think it's exciting about this kind of work, but it's one of those threads that as you start pulling it, you realize, oh, wait, this is actually quite complicated. There's a lot of CS PhDs over the years that have tried to tackle this in different ways.
Yeah.
Because like how your code runs depends on configuration, depends on input, branching through if statements and control flow logic.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of ways that you could potentially look at this. And some of those things, like I said, you can have analysis tools on the side. And so if we come back to your question of what additional engineering work we could do to have the LLM better understand, analyze codes, code. I think it really depends on the specific job you're trying to do, the task you're trying to accomplish. So if you want, your code to run faster, then yeah, I think give it a profiling tool. Maybe give it the ability to execute your code against that profiler in different configurations versus something else. You might need a different, you're optimizing for memory or you're optimizing for complexity.
Yep.
And so that's one of the benefits, not to ramble, and I think I'm repeating myself now, but the benefits of having tools available to the agent is you can go down these different paths and integrate with specific tools that do a very specific type of analysis.
Yeah, it's a design pattern that it opens you up to so much when you can just start saying, it just allows you to build something very powerful, very fast by just leveraging what's out there already and taking the LLM and having it orchestrate it, call things in a certain, it's just a way to scale it pretty quickly. And especially there's a lot of development teams that have their own specialized tools already available, right? They've got their own code available. So call those. I mean, that's a faster way to do things. I don't think I've ever worked at a company that didn't have its own. Of course, they have like third-party stuff they did, but they've got their own homemade stuff that devs have made over the years to run their run data analysis or whatever they're doing, making sure that the job ran on time and people configured things correctly. The entire CI/CD process. There really is just no limit to how you could extend this stuff. All right. Well, so we're about 26 minutes here. Maybe guys, you and I can just kind of summarize our goals and what we're trying to get out of this and where we are. So, I mean, again, our original goal was me saying, hey, let's do something step by step that we can share with everybody. And then we picked this for the reasons we've discussed before. It was fun. It was something new and interesting to us. We had the data and allowed us to explore a lot of avenues. And I feel like in terms of investing time in this, we kind of accomplished what we wanted to accomplish. Like we figured out how to do it. We know the approach. And I mean, there's infinite ways you can go with one of these projects. And I don't want to say, well, it's just execution, because like execution is everything. But do we want to use open source LLMs? Do we want to add particular, I mean, what we have works for us now. It accomplishes what we do. And it's a good time to kind of put it down where it is. I think it'd work with some other stuff now that we're getting busier. I don't know how you feel about it, but it's like.
Yeah, I agree. We have a very solid foundation, and I think we're going to continue working on this, at least on the side, because it's something that we want. It's easier for us, and it's at a stage now because we've taken this approach where we have an agent that can interact with different tools. Really, what we'd be doing going forward is adding tools, adding functionality. And so, yeah, I think we've accomplished what we wanted to. And to summarize again, I think what we've done over the last couple of weeks is we chose a project that we cared about. We laid out the kind of data foundations. How do we read code, parse code, the data structures, and get organized on that front. We built out the core agent function that can call tools, and then just started adding out tools. The fourth thing that I realized I forgot to mention earlier, but it's really important, and we had a live stream on this, I think a couple of weeks ago, was evaluation.
Right, of course. Yeah.
And so those, I think now 4 components of, data, the LLM interface, adding tools, and then having an evaluation framework is what the foundation we laid over the past month that will allow us to pretty easily maintain and extend this in the future.
Yep. It's exciting stuff. I'm hopeful we reach the day where we're giving our clients like a version of this on the projects we deliver, where we deliver a solution for them as part of it. Instead of a README and documentation, we give them a customized LLM where they can learn about the code. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges with that from their environment, the LLM security. That's not quite that. There's a lot of considerations there for you to drop a new component into somebody's environment. But I could see the world going. I could see a year from now where when people have open source projects, having an LLM application like this on top of the code is just part of what you deliver, because it just makes it easier for people to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's like I like me. I don't have to do the work. So I'm like, oh, this will be easy. We'll just do this on our client applications.
Well, it reminds me of. I know only maybe a couple of examples. One in mind right now, somebody who recently published a book, and alongside the book, they released a model that had been fine-tuned on their book. And so you could read the book, but then you also have this model on the side.
Yeah.
So what is this reference here actually referring to? Or tell me more about the character mentioned in this piece of history. And so, yeah, it's the same idea. A little bit more challenging because it's code and not just natural language, not just text.
Exactly.
But I think something like that could be really, really cool, but also is really helpful. So you download a library, but then you can interact with it and natural language, ask questions.
Somebody asked us, what are the operational cost of your project? $79. That was what our OpenAI bill was for January. So this is hard to answer. So the operational cost of doing this is the teams, the engineering time spent doing it, plus whatever you're paying for your model. I don't have a great way of answering that. Yeah, I'm not. How would you even begin estimating the effort required to maintain? I hate to say answer. It depends, but I guess it depends on how much you want to do with it. I mean, if you just want a general code Q&A, it's not a lot. I mean, we just proved that it's not that hard. You're talking a couple of weeks of work, and then it's rerunning everything to update the summaries. I think if you start integrating tools and more extensible, then then I guess it's more challenging. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, well, as you said, I didn't know the $79 number, but the big cost are, the people behind it and the cost of time in terms of, how far you want to take it.
I guess $59 because we paid that to be $29. We have to pay $20 for the subscription. So yeah, the OpenAI cost, there was not a lot there. I mean, we weren't like pounding it every day in an operational environment, but I mean, so I can't. That also, that's a function of your usage and queries. But I got to believe that, well, I don't know, open source LLMs for this, I guess the summarization, you probably could find other LLMs to do that. The reasoning and tool usage, that's probably where you need a bigger LLM for that one, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's something I'd be interested in. I think we all want to experiment with because, we just really need something that's good at dispatching tools and reasoning over that aspect of what tool should I use and then interpreting the output from it. And so we might be able to get pretty good performance. I'm speculating, but I think pretty good performance with a smaller model. Maybe that's, in the 30 billions parameters. I don't know.
Yep.
We don't need something that knows about Roman history and, the philosophy of literature and all these things that GPT has internalized in its weights. And so I'm sure there is a path towards optimization where we could have an agent model that is much smaller than something like GPT-4, but it would be a matter of kind of charting that course and choosing the right model, and,
right?
Crafting prompts.
Yeah, no, I mean, somebody's going to come up with a small model that's good at reading Python code, right? Or just whatever. I mean, that's like, I think that's inevitable. If it's not, I mean, I know there's ones out there that are good, but I think somebody will go figure out, you know what, I'm going to make a 7B parameter model that's awesome at reading Python code and that is fast and summarizing what functions it does. I have to believe that's on its way. In that case, I mean, you could probably run this thing on your laptop locally. I mean, on a new MacBook Pro, I mean, that's when it really opens up. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, Diver. Just to focus and maybe back up a little bit, I think you would want to start looking at a project like this when you are building a large, complex system and you have an ongoing cost of developer turnover, people having to chase everyone down to understand what does this function do. New developer, it's like your documentation isn't great, which I've never been in a software project in my life where the documentation was updated. The wiki's outdated. I can't when maintenance and updating and sort of interrogating, understand what's happening at the system is really hard. And even when you have devs who've been on a system for a year or two, usually they're working on some area that they have some knowledge about, but there's some other part of it that they code base or another library they never look at all. And I think helping them understand how things work, that's where I could see this having a lot of value. I think it will be hard to convince the CFO to invest in something like this. They won't understand it. It's an internal efficiency thing, and it's like, yeah, making my developers more efficient. Whatever. I expect a lot of development teams will just decide to do it on their own because it'll be easier for them. Maybe different if you're talking like a mission critical application that runs a process, a core business function at a financial services company. We've had some of this conversations already, especially where they're running on legacy systems that maybe don't have so much support in older languages. Anyway, I don't know. I'm rambling a bit there, but it was a good question. But I guess maybe I turned it more into value than operational cost. So, what are the costs of having developers not fully understand the system, and what's the cost of bringing on a new developer? Like the latter, I know is a lot. Like that's real money, and companies certainly recognize that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Justin. Any final thoughts, reflections? As you look with the cat, I mean, again, congratulations for you and what the team did. This was pretty impressive in a short period of time. My only contribution was like saying, "Hey guys, let's come up with an idea for a project." And after that, you guys did everything.
It was a lot of fun. I mean, and this is one that scratched our own itch, so to speak, because I mean, so many times, almost everybody, especially in AI right now, there's so many new things coming out, so many new libraries. You open up a library, you just want to understand it at a high level and ask some questions. And so this certainly has utility for us. And I thought it was also interesting because it's not like, as we've mentioned, Copilot, we see a lot of models that can write code, but not really systems that can help you to reason over code and ask questions about code. So it was certainly interesting from our perspective. And
yeah,
it's happening right now that I can't wait to see where things go.
Yeah, it is. And I guess maybe just leave it at this: is if you are a developer out there and you're looking for a first way to use large language models and to do something more than just, RAG application on the blog post, which you're going to get bored with in about 15 minutes. Like this is one where you can actually really dive in and learn how these things work, learn how agents work, learn how tools work, because you're going to be building it for yourself and you have access to data, you can evaluate what happens. And it's just I think it's a great first project to cut your teeth on. So awesome. All right. Thanks a bunch, Justin. Thanks everyone for joining us. Again, apologize for some of the difficulties up front, but that's what makes live sessions fun. Take care, everyone.